Hi everybody, it's Ros from North Mayo Fine Arts. In today's video I'm going to show you how to draw clouds and the sky, and I'm going to be working on this section above the tractor. Now I'm going to use a variety of different colours for this, and I'm using mostly polychromos today. I'm using the cold greys and just a selection of the gradients of the cold greys, and I'm also using a couple of different shades of blue as well. I do have a couple of Prismacolor thrown in there, but they are mainly polychromos. Now what I tend to do when I'm drawing sky is I see where the blue areas are and I block those in first in a very light shade of blue, so that you can basically see where it is, but you're not putting down too much colour. And as I can see on this reference photo, there's quite a good concentration of blue just around here. So I'm going to start off by just adding that in, because I want to make sure that wherever it is blue, it's going to definitely be blue. I don't want the greys to contaminate the area. Now this particular area isn't solid colour, so I'm going to make it quite patchy. Still going to follow the reference photo and get everything in basically the right place, but I'm not gonna just put down an awful lot of solid colour, because then that won't look realistic. And I want this to have the effect. There's just a hint of blue just here. It's not very strong at all. So I don't want to make it a very solid area. Just want a hint of the colour where it needs to be. Like that. And then this area here just has a hint of blue in it, and there's grey going over the top, so I'll just lay down a small bit of the blue so I know more or less where it needs to be. It doesn't have to be perfect at all. This is just a basic blocking in. And there's also a bit just here. This is much darker, so I will be layering greys over the blues to get the colour that I need. Now when drawing clouds, when I first started drawing, I thought clouds had to be almost uniform. It had to be a certain shape, had to be a certain way, and I've learned over the time that I've been drawing that they really don't. I obviously do follow my reference photo, but if I get a bit of cloud in the wrong place or a slightly different shade, it's not the end of the world. It can be corrected. Now moving on to another blue here, which is sky blue. And I'm just going around the areas that need to have the blue in. Now I'm using circular motions here because I want it to be smooth and seamless within the cloudy area. Now I'm using very light pressure. I don't want to burnish the colour into the paper because there are going to be more layers going on top. So I'm using a light hand, very light pressure, not pushing down at all. And you can see in the areas that have only got very, very light hints of the colour, I'm hardly putting anything on. Now this here is a very, very solid definition line. So I'm actually gonna draw the line almost onto the paper. I want there to be a very definite difference in the colour above and below this cloud. Now, please, when you're drawing clouds, don't worry about thinking they have to be a certain shape or they have to look wispy and soft. There are so many variations of clouds that they don't have to all be the same. If you actually spend some time, what I've done is I've spent time when the weather's nice in the garden just actually looking up and looking at the clouds and the variation that there are. And there's such a huge variety of different cloud formations that when you're drawing them, no matter how you end up drawing them, it's gonna look like a cloud. Now again, I'm using circular motions and a very light hand because this bit just needs a hint of the colour. This bit at this side is much brighter and there's a much higher saturation of blue in this area than there is in the other areas. So I'm going to use slightly more pressure, but again I don't want to burnish the pencil onto the paper because I do want to add more layers. If I burnish the paper too soon, I won't get the additional layers on it because the tooth of the paper will have been damaged and it just simply won't accept any more layers of colour. And I don't want that. I need to still be able to add several more layers of colour onto this. Now, so I've got the blue on in most of the areas that I want it on. Just a small bit that I've noticed just here. That I'll add now before I forget. And I'm coming straight on with the darker blue because I know this area does want to be quite a bright blue. So using the lighter shade underneath isn't essential. Like so. Now what I want to do is show you how I start my clouds. So what I would tend to do is I'd get the lightest shade of grey that I'm going to use, and in this case it is Cold Grey 1 from the Polychromos range, and basically I'm just going to draw in the shapes that I want the clouds to be in. Because I'm using the lightest pencil and I'm using a very light hand, as you can see, I'm actually holding the pencil quite far up. So there's no way that I can actually add an awful lot of pressure at this angle. And this is another tip that I want to give you. If you do have problems controlling the amount of pressure that you use when you're using your pencils, pull your fingers further up the pencil and hold it further away from the actual lead. If you hold it further up the pencil, you can't apply too much pressure because you don't have the control up here that you would have if you were right down at the front of the pencil. If you're on the front of the pencil there, you can push down as hard as you want. If you come higher up the pencil, if you try and use pressure, it's just going to snap your lead. So that's a tip that I would advise anybody that's struggling. I used to be very heavy-handed when I was drawing. Several people commented to me about it, and it was something that I hadn't even noticed until it was brought to my attention, and then immediately I realised what I was doing. And since I've actually changed the way I hold my pencil when I'm doing different techniques, it's actually helped an awful lot. So my recommendation would be, if you're struggling with controlling your pressure, to hold the pencil higher up. So I'm holding the pencil quite high here because I just want to make very light pencil marks so that I know where the different depths of colour are going to be on these clouds. So I'm going to come back up here. Like so. And I'm going to go around. Now, these lines are not straight at all because the clouds aren't straight. You won't find a straight cloud. So I'm following the basic shapes. So I've got the basic lines down there. What I'm going to do now is move up a shade of the cold grey. So this is now Cold Grey 2. And what I want to do now is just put slightly more colour down where the darker areas are going to be. This pencil actually isn't very long, so it's quite hard to hold it further up the pencil, but I'm not putting very much pressure on this at all. I am just gently going around in circular motions, just applying some colour. Now I am going to use a blender on my clouds today because I want to have a really nice smooth effect to them. I don't want to see any lines in the pencil work, so I will be using my blender, and I'll be using my colour shapers again, my new favourite tools. Now if anybody is interested in knowing where you can get the colour shapers from, I personally got them from Jackson's Art Supplies online. That's in the UK, and if you're in the US, I have found them on Amazon.com, and I've also found them at Dick Blick, so I know that you can definitely get them from there. I personally got them from Jackson's because I think it's a fantastic company. I use it all the time. The customer service is absolutely amazing. So, just going to keep going around now and just adding some more of this darker grey to the areas that I know are going to end up quite dark. Now there isn't just grey in the clouds, there are actually hints of blue in there, so I will be layering some blue into these clouds as I'm working on them. Now as you can see, I've now got one solid layer of colour down, and I'm now going to blend just this bit out so you can see. I'm going to use my colour shaper once I've cleaned the colour off it. Now I'm going to use colour shaper, and today I'm going to use this one, which is called a cup chisel. And the reason I'm using this one is because not only have you got the very fine end here, but you've also got a slightly solid area just there. And it's nice to have the option of being able to turn it to use it depending on what you want to do. So this is the one I'm choosing to use. I'm going to start off using this small solid area. So I'm going to start up here, and again, I don't want to put too much pressure on the pencils using the blender, because you can actually burnish the colours using a blender. So again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to hold the colour shaper further up the actual handle of it, rather than holding it very, very close to the blender itself. And I'm going to go around very gently. I'm not applying too much pressure. I just want it to blend it out a small bit. Now, another tip that I've got about blending is that there are different ways to blend. You can use odourless mineral spirits such as Zestit or Gamsol or Mona Lisa. I don't tend to use those. I have never seemed to have got on with them. And it's a personal thing. If you love odourless mineral spirits, then brilliant. I've seen an awful lot of artists have amazing results with them. Unfortunately, I'm not one of them. I tend to stick to dry blenders. Now, for me, the plus about using a dry blender such as this colour shaper is the fact that you don't have to have 3 or 4 layers of colour down before you actually use the blender. With the odourless mineral spirits, you have to have 3 or 4 layers of colour down before you can even start to use it, because you have to have that much pigment on the paper for it to actually blend into the tooth of the paper. Now, with a dry blender such as the one I'm using here, I've only actually put down so far 1 layer of colour, but it is blending it, and it is blending it into the tooth of the paper. By tooth, all the different types of paper that you can use for drawing have a certain amount of texture on them. And the actual texture is called the tooth, and it's basically valleys and hills. And when you're drawing, your pencil lead, depending on how sharp it is, will colour in. And if it's a very, very sharp pencil, generally it will go into all the valleys. If it doesn't, you'll see little white spots showing through your pencil. And that means that you haven't covered all the paper and you haven't got the colour into the tooth of the paper. Now, the odourless mineral spirits are good for that, because once you've got 3 or 4 layers of colour down, because it blends them using a liquid, it will get them all into the tooth of the paper. With dry blenders, it's a little bit more work, because you have to actually manipulate the colour on the paper using the dry blender to get it into all the nooks and crannies on your paper, the tooth of your paper. Now, I still prefer dry blenders myself, but what I would suggest is, if you find, once you've put a layer of colour down, if you find that you're still seeing lots of little white spots, I would suggest, number 1, sharpening your pencil and making sure it's got a really nice fine point. And if you hold, whilst you're actually colouring, if you hold your pencil slightly higher and use circular motions like that, that tends to help getting it into the tooth of the paper. Whereas if you hold your pencil quite flat like that, you're actually using the side of the pencil rather than the tip. For example, I'll show you here. If I use this pencil and I actually colour using the very, very tip like this, it gets it into all of the paper. Like so. Use small circular motions, it gets it into all of the different valleys in the paper, in the tooth. And you get a really nice colour down on your paper because there's no white mark showing through. Whereas if I use the pencil at much more of a side angle, it wears the pencil down very quickly, and then you're actually working on the side of your pencil rather than right on the tip. So this will wear down very, very quickly. And then I'll be using the side of the pencil, and I'm not actually getting the benefit from the actual tip of the pencil lead. And this then, as you can see here, is skipping over a lot of the valleys in the tooth of the paper, and it isn't filling them. And that's going to give you a much harder job then to actually get the pencil in to the valleys, and you're going to have to spend a long time blending, and it just makes life more difficult. Whereas if you come up even just a small bit and you actually get the tip, you can see now when I'm going over with the tip of the pencil and I'm going in my circular motions, it's filling in all of the white areas there, which then will make blending it a lot easier because you're not having to try and push it into the valleys, you're just trying to get yourself a smooth look, or the look that you're going for depending on what you're drawing. It doesn't have to be smooth. Now you can see by me holding the pencil up quite high, again it's putting the pencil into the tooth of the paper, which is giving us a nice look. And now I will come back with the lighter shade that I was using, and I will actually overlap ever so slightly the lighter colour that I was using with the darker colour, and that gives you a nice blend, and the two colours blend into each other. Now I will be using my blender to finish blending these in, but there are occasions that just doing this and overlapping the darker colour with a lighter colour is enough. It's enough to actually blend them together. But because I'm working on clouds and I want a really nice, smooth, floaty finish, I'm going to be using my blender. Now for this next section I'm actually going to use the very flat edge at the top, and I'm going to come in and I'm using the blender in a circular motion to blend in the two colours together, because I don't want a solid harsh line in between the two colours. I want them to blend in seamlessly. And as you can see now I've actually been blending them like so. See, they've actually blended in really nicely together. Now if you need to add more colour, once you've blended it like this, if you need to add more colour you can go back over and you can add some more colour. So I want to add just a small bit more of the middle of the three shades that I've used of the grey. And I'm going to go back over now. As you can see there's quite a big valley there, so I'm going to hold my pencil right up on its tip and I'm going to make sure that I get the colour into that valley. So I don't want any white of the paper showing up unless I specifically leave it white. So I'm just going around and I'm just adding more of this mid-tone of the greys that I'm using for the clouds. Like so. I'll come up to the top. Now I'm constantly looking at my reference photo when I'm doing this because I want to make sure that the clouds are as close as possible to the reference photo. They don't have to be exact, but I do want it to look as close as possible. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to overlap the two greys to blend them. And I'm going to go back over now with my blending tool to blend it all out. Like so. Now at this point I want to add some blue because there's a very definite blue tinge to the clouds. Now I'm using quite a pale blue for this because I don't want it to get too dark. I want to keep the very dark blue pencils for the very, very dark areas. So for an area like this, I use a light pencil. Now I am going over all of the grey, right up to the edge of where the grey is, because I want to make it all look even. Like so. And again I'm using circular motions here because I want it to be seamless. I don't want to see pencil lines. And I'm going to add some here as well. And you can see that has actually changed the colour of the cloud from just a very dark grey. It's actually brightened up the cloud somewhat. Like that. So I'm now going to carry on doing exactly the same that I've just done here, and I will come back to you in a bit because I want to show you this area. I'm going to work my way down to it. So I will come back to you once I reach this area here. So as you can see, I've now completed all of the sky above the tractor, and I've also deepened some of the colours in the area that I'd already coloured. The only area that's left now is this very white area. Now, several people have asked me recently, how do you make an area that is white on a reference photo look white on the drawing? And my answer is always use the paper. Take advantage of the fact that you're using white paper and keep the white areas white. Now this particular area here has quite a lot of very bright white in it, so I'm going to take advantage of that and I'm going to actually use the paper and not add any colour to those areas. So I've already started a couple of the lines, and what I'm actually doing is just putting some of the lightest colour down where there is colour on the clouds, but I'm not putting any colour on the areas that are going to stay white because I don't want to contaminate those bits of paper. So I'm just moving across now. I'm just adding colour where I can see on my reference photo it needs to go. Now, I know it sounds like an obvious thing to do, to use the white of your paper, but it's actually quite surprising how many people don't. They add colour and then they try and lighten it back up with a white pencil, and you will never ever get it back as white as it was when it was just paper. So if I was only going to give you one piece of advice, it would be to use the white of the paper, because it is so much easier to keep the bright white. Now the paper that I'm using for this piece is Fabriano Artistico Hot Pressed Extra White 300 GSM watercolour paper, and I always use the extra white because I just think that it's so important to have the white paper if you're wanting to do certain highlights and certain techniques. So that's why I always tend to get the extra white one. But the Fabriano paper is up to now, my all-time favourite paper. It's what I use for every project. And I prefer to buy it in the large sheets rather than the pads, because the texture and the tooth of the paper is just better in the large sheets than it is on the actual pads that you can get. So I always buy the large sheets and then cut them down to the size that I need. Now, I've added the first colour, and I'm now going to jump up to Cold Grey 3, and I'm going to darken up some of the darkest areas with the Cold Grey 3, and I'm not going to put any of the dark colour onto the lightest portions of the clouds. And I'm going to stay well away from the white areas. Definitely wouldn't want to get any of this on the white areas. Now, you don't have to be perfect when drawing clouds at all. I am just using small circular motions to get the colour onto the drawing. But as you can see, I'm not being precise, I'm not being overly careful about it. I am just getting the colour down because you don't have to be over precise. All clouds are different. No two clouds are ever going to be exactly the same. And as long as you give the impression of the cloud being the shape that it is, or have the colours in it that it's got, that is absolutely fine. So I'm just going to continue to go around and just add some of this dark colour. There's a small touch there. But again, I'm completely leaving the white areas alone. Now I want to add a bit of blue. And the blue I'm actually using is a Prismacolor colour. and it's light cerulean blue. Now I don't want too much of it, I just want an idea of it. Now this pencil isn't overly sharp, and the reason it's not overly sharp is because I don't want harsh lines, I want it to be nice and soft. So I've been using this pencil earlier on the other clouds, and I'm deliberately not sharpening it now. I've said in a previous video that there are certain times where you actually would be better with a slightly less sharp pencil, and this is one of them. When you want a slightly softer image, if you like, you use a slightly duller pencil. There's a little bit just used on the outside of the cloud there. I'm always finding bits that I could improve. I think every artist gets that. You have to know when to stop. Well, I certainly have to know when to stop. And sometimes I just need to put my pencils away to get rid of the temptation of adding more colour. So, I've done that bit. So now I'm going to go back to the lightest shade once I pick it up off the floor. And I am going to just go around these very dark areas just to soften up the edges ever so slightly. Now, I'm just going around the edge and I'm using circular motions again. And I'm just overlapping ever so slightly the edges. And then I'm actually going over the whole of the colour that I've already put down, because I want it to look nice and soft. I don't want it to have the harsh edge, and I want it to look nice and soft. Now, drawing clouds, there's no right or wrong way of doing it. All I will say is have a really good look at your reference photo, because in every image that there is of clouds, there will be a multitude of different colours in it, because clouds pick up colours around them. So if, say for example, the clouds are over a field of poppies, there is more than likely going to be some red in the clouds. It all depends on what else is in the photo. Don't ever be afraid to add colour. There you go. And as you can see, the white bits that I haven't touched are still lovely and white. Now I have gone over a bit there that I didn't actually want to. And what I'm now going to do is use my Tombow eraser, and I'm just going to pick up the colour again. With it being the lightest shade of the cold grey, it's very easy to pick it up. And if I wanted to lighten up, for example, this line here actually looks slightly darker than I originally wanted it to. If I go back over with the eraser, it takes a small bit of the colour back off, and that's now a much softer look. I might do it with this one as well. Like that. So, even if you do make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. Everything can be corrected. There you go. I am just going to ever so slightly soften up that line. That looks more natural now. I will probably continue to tweak these bits this evening until I get it absolutely perfect. But I just wanted to show you how you can actually make use of the colour of the paper. If you've enjoyed watching this video, please give me a big thumbs up. And if you want to see more of my videos, then subscribe to my channel. If you want to see more of my work, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and Pinterest by searching for North Mayo Fine Art. Thanks for watching.